Sojourns welcomes Swami Sarvapriyananda. I've heard it said many times that nobody can will themselves to become enlightened. Do you agree with that?
No, just the opposite. Ask and you shall find. Knock and it shall be opened. Absolutely. There is no doubt about it. We are enlightenment seeking beings.
This Swami is not lukewarm on this topic. He absolutely means what he says.
But enlightenment, God realization, spiritual realization, whatever you call it, that is our birthright. We can ask for it, we must ask for it, and we will get it when we ask for it.
Swami belongs to the Ramakrishna order of monks that teaches the true self is not the body or the mind, but the eternal soul that is identical with the divine.
So take us from the unreal to the real. Take us from the world appearance to the spiritual reality called Brahman, existence, consciousness, bliss, which is right here, all the time available, staring at us in the face, but we don't recognize it.
And recognizing it is key. It could take a long time or no time.
The moment of enlightenment itself can be a flash, a sudden revelation. But afterwards also there's a long effort of manifesting that realization in life.
It was Swami Vivekananda who actually began the Ramakrishna order by claiming enlightenment is here now, as if it's fogged over, which each of us can learn to see through.
It's for all of us. And until we find that, until we are on the path and we find that, we will not feel fulfilled. We will keep on seeking and we will keep on suffering.
Swami Sarvapriyananda is known everywhere for the clarity with which he teaches. And for Westerners, he excels at teaching how most religions are dualistic, whereas the path he follows is not.
Most of the other sects of Hinduism were dualistic. There is God, you are an immortal being, and you have a relationship with God. God is the master, you are the servant, God is the ruler, or you the rule. Very Christian that way, I mean, the kind of dualistic relationship with God. Advaita Vedanta was like a bombshell among them, which says that you and the divine are one reality, actually.
Swami's lasting message: look to the world outside if you choose, but look inside to find your truth.
But I or we, the experiencer, who or what we are, this is the quest. The clue is that this reality we are seeking, which will solve our problems at a deep existential level, which will fulfill us, is our real nature.
Swami Sarvapriyananda's spiritual order was founded by Swami Vivekananda, who played a major role in bringing Advaita Vedanta to America in 1893. In New York City, the Vedanta Society is headquartered here. Swami Sarvapriyananda's message today is vital for those interested in learning one's truest identity. Welcome to Sojourns. This interview was recorded in New York City and Coronado, California on October 19th, 2023. Swami Sarvapriyananda from New York City, the Vedanta Center. It's a real pleasure to welcome you to Sojourns. And before we get started on anything, would you kindly start us with the Asatoma prayer and chant for us, like you always do?
All right, that's my favorite. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace.
That pretty much says it all, Swami. Thank you. Being with the Sai Baba as his faithful student, my wife too, with many, many trips to Prashanti Nilayam in India, that would be a daily staple of everything, that chant. And of course, it says it all in 4 brief phrases there. Speaking of which, let's begin with one of those phrases, the very first one. Lead us from the unreal to the real. You're going to be speaking to a number of newcomers here. For some odd reason, in the videos that I do, I attract newcomers, probably because I feel, even though I've been on this path for many years, that I'm still a newcomer in some respects. For them and for others, perhaps, would you, as succinctly as you can, explain to them the definition of what is the unreal.
And more than the unreal, the real is what is important. From the unreal to the real. I like what you said, that being open to newcomers. It's probably because you have a fresh and open mind to the spiritual path. Upanishads define the ultimate reality, Brahman, the ultimate reality of this universe, as a wonder. And it's good that we don't forget that it's a wonder. It's good to look at it with a fresh eyes, a child's eyes, like a toddler appreciating a butterfly in the garden or something like that, with those eyes, so that we don't lose that sense of wonder. The wonder is this: we are quite habituated to this world, our quotidian lives. And that's how we go through life. Every day is more or less a variation of the same. And we find it unsatisfactory. In some cases, it's very intense, serious physical pain, loss, bereavement, sometimes on a huge scale of disasters and wars and brutality. Sometimes the minor personal tragedies, which maybe just about every family and every person, into each life some rain will fall. And we see no way out of it. Even religion becomes part of this quotidian day-to-day life. Now, the message of spirituality, of Vedanta, but spirituality in general, in all religious traditions, is that there is a deep solution to this problem we have of, from the problem of suffering, which ranges from one end, from, minor irritations and general existential angst, to the other end of intense physical, mental, and spiritual suffering. There is a solution. It's not that we are condemned to live lives which are dissatisfactory, unhappy, and then they come to an end and that's it. No. One of the most ancient texts from the Vedas says that, some sages singing this: "Listen, ye children of immortal bliss. I have realized that infinite being, radiant like the sun, forever beyond darkness. Realizing that, one goes beyond death and human limitation, beyond the darkness of death. And there is no other way. There's no other way." So this is the message of all spiritual traditions, in all religions, in different language, different metaphors, different theologies and philosophies, but all says that there is indeed great hope. So there is a reality which we have to realize, which we have to make real in our lives, and that reality will solve our deepest quest. So call it Brahman. The Vedanta calls it Brahman, and has a very clear idea, as far as it can be clear about it, as limitless existence. It's also limitless awareness or consciousness, and limitless fulfillment. And that is the real. We don't seem to find it here. It's not because we are not experiencing the real. I mean, if it's real, how could it ever go beyond our experience? So we are experiencing it, but we sort of tend to misunderstand it, cover it up with a veil, as it were.
Yeah.
And yeah, the veil of this worldly appearance. And that's what is the unreal. When we chanted, "Take us from the unreal to the real," the unreal is here. The real is also right here.
Yeah.
And in fact, the idea of the unreal is actually to point to the real. It works this way. The classic example in Vedanta of the snake and the rope. Imagine yourself in the evening in some Indian village. It's not unnatural that you'll suddenly see a snake in the corner. It turns out to be an innocent, harmless rope, but for a moment, you felt it was a snake and you got terribly scared of it. When you investigate it, you find, oh, it's not a snake. The snake was false. It was a mistake, an error. It's really a rope. Now, if you ask the question, where is the reality called the rope? And the answer will be exactly where you are perceiving the snake. The very fact that the snake is false, it's not real, means that there is a reality right there. Mm-hmm. What is, after all, the false? What is, after all, appearance, not unreal? It is not what you think it is. It is something else, and you're mistaking it for something else. It's a rope, and we are mistaking it for a snake. So take us from the unreal to the real. In Vedantic terms, take us from the world appearance to the spiritual reality called Brahman, existence, consciousness, bliss. In a general sense, if we just want to put it in English in general, take us from our quotidian world experience to the spiritual reality, which is right here, all the time available, staring at us in the face, but we don't recognize it. So this transition, not from here to somewhere else, not from now to some other time, not from this thing to some other thing, but this thing itself, to really appreciate it for the first time. I think we can say with Ulysses' words, not to see new things, but to see old things with new eyes.
That's a good way to put it.
That's exactly the taking us from the unreal to the real. And just one more thing, the beauty of Vedanta is this reality is you yourself. This is the amazing thing. Not to look outside, can look outside and you can study it, and science will tell you wonderful things about what you experience. But I or we, the experiencer, who or what we are, this is the quest. And the clue is that this reality we are seeking, which will solve our problems at a deep existential level, which will fulfill us, is our real nature.
So recognizing that is the key for each and every one of us by removing the veil, as you call it. I call it the fog. And as it starts to lift slowly but surely, it's a whole new world of revelation to each and every one of us. I have a question for you that I'm going to bet you a quarter is the first time it's ever been asked of you. It's certainly not a difficult question. I'm told that whether one reaches the lofty stages of enlightenment with all the veil and fog removed or not, the learning curve exists for each and every one of us on the path or at the destination of the path. So what have you learned that's new about understanding your own self, let's say in the last 2 months or the last 2 days?
Yeah, it's a continuous process. And the advantage is that you have these amazing teachings to throw light upon your journey. You begin to see, oh, I see. So this is what those texts meant. And I see, so this is where I went wrong, and this is where I have to pay attention. It's good to have that framework in the background, but then it's more amazing when it becomes a living reality. So I am continuously learning the importance of attention, the importance of the heart in relation to the intellect. These are things that life keeps teaching us from moment to moment. All right. So here's one thing I learned yesterday. I met this monk from India, very interesting. I won't say old, must be around a little bit older than me. A luminous person. And I was attracted by the light in his eyes and his sweet smile. And the thing I learned from him was he had this very peculiar little, like a name tag, but it wasn't his name. It just said, in silence. So he's usually in silence, not that he doesn't talk. He turns it around and then he talks to you and then turns it back on. And then he doesn't have a phone. He doesn't talk about anything except spiritual matters. And most of all, he's happy when he's not talking. And yet he travels around the world teaching meditation. So that's something that I learned. Yeah. One can say, you switch off your phone, don't talk so much, keep quiet. You can say all that, you can even think it's a good thing, but to actually see the effect of a person, someone who has been doing it for decades, and see it in the face of this person and in the few words that he uttered, that's a really strong selling point.
Well, I can see it in your face with that broad smile, Swamiji, that it's a minuscule but significant awakening for you, proving my point. I use the word pointings. I never once thought of pointings or looked for them in my life. I think they happen for everybody on the path. They might miss them mostly. I go looking for them, actually, and son of a gun if I don't find them on a regular basis. They're small sometimes, occasionally they're big, but they're always new insights that I've never entertained before. And I like to think that learning curve continues forever and ever.
I always thought that the texts are pointing, teachings are pointings, but I realized yesterday a person is a pointing, a very powerful pointing too. Just looking at the face of that monk, it was a powerful pointing.
Sure. That monk sounds like he must have been or might have been enlightened. When a person gets to that lofty position, what's next for them? What's their purpose? Is it to be of support to others just by their enlightenment that they involuntarily shed to others? Or is it for some other reason, perhaps to make people feel comfortable in their own skin around him?
All of that. Sometimes when we speak about enlightenment, especially in the Eastern traditions, in Vedanta, in Buddhism, it sounds like the goal of your life. And then one might ask, if you have done it, then what after that? It sounds like somebody said, doesn't life become boring? Doesn't life become purposeless after you're enlightened? If that's the goal of life, you've reached it. And now what? Rather the other way around. For the first time, one is living. Before that, we are sort of sleepwalking through life. Before that, we're leading, as somebody said, lives of quiet desperation. For the first time, you're free, you're relaxed. Vivekananda, Swami Vivekananda, when he came to the West in the late 1890s, in the early 1890s, he met Robert Ingersoll, who was a great agnostic. In fact, recently Yale University published a book about Ingersoll. The name of the book is The Great Agnostic. And he was a famous public speaker. He rejected all of religion and spirituality. And he said to Vivekananda, they met and they talked. He said to Vivekananda, I don't believe any of that. I believe in squeezing the orange of life dry, squeezing it to get every drop of it, not in religion or metaphysics or spirituality. And Vivekananda said, I believe the same thing too, except in my choice of fruit, it's a mango rather than an orange. But then he said, but the way I do it, I know that I cannot die, so I'm not in a hurry. I know that everybody is one with God. Imagine my enjoyment, in meeting people and doing things in the world, that I am immersed in God all the time. Imagine my happiness, my fulfillment. Squeeze your orange in this way, get 10,000-fold more, get every last drop. So when one is enlightened, or when one is spiritually advanced, one need not even use the term enlightened. The more one advances on this path, the more one really begins to live.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought him up, because I think I remember hearing from you, and I think I might have even read it aside from one of your talks in 1893, I think it was, here in his maybe first trip to America. His impression after he left, that he confided to others, was that he saw America as a place of fading spiritual interests or inclinations. I went back and looked it up in Google search, and found out that 93% of all Americans back at that turn of the century time believed in God, and a very high percentage also believed in going to church or going to temple or mosque, whatever it might be. What do you suppose he meant by that? Sounds like a contradiction.
Yeah, it does. But he was prophetic in certain ways. He could see where society was going, where America was going, and where, the century that was coming, the 20th century. He was there here in America in the last decade of the 19th century. So the century that was coming was going to be the American century. And so where the world was going, where America was going and where the world was going, that conventional religion was already beginning to lose its grasp on people. What it was, a church-going population in late 1890s, now if you compare it to today, there's a vast difference.
Especially today. I mean, he was prescient, knowing that this turn of events was happening at that early time. But I'm even surprised to hear you say that. But today, the church going, the believing in God in America, in the West, is lower than I think it's been since the founding of this country.
Absolutely, absolutely. And he realized that conventional religion was going to lose ground, because from time to time, genuine spirituality sort of gets covered over with ritual, belief, politics, social concerns, all of which may be good, but that's not the core of spirituality. The core of spirituality is that ultimate reality we're speaking about, from the unreal to the real. It's true. God does exist. An immortal soul does exist. A spiritual solution to our problems do exist. Religion is not superstition. Religion is not fairy tales. Religion is not even doing good. Vivekananda said, in this country, in the United States, he said, in this country, most people think religion is giving intellectual assent to a set of beliefs and belonging to a particular church and doing some good to society. Now, all of those may be true, but they are just the very exterior of religion. The interior of religion, the true spiritual life, is a spiritual life within. and which takes you towards the spiritual reality. You can call it Brahman, God, the Tao, whatever you call it. There is a spiritual reality. It's not a way of speaking, as some would have it. Extra clever people come up with extra clever ways of showing that religion is not true. It's some kind of, father complex, if you ask Freud. It's some kind of economic necessity, if you ask Marx. And so these are the sages of the 20th century who worked very hard to convince us that religion is not true. I mean, it's a sort of grand illusion. Vivekananda was the counter prophet. He said it's not an illusion. He spoke with the voice of the sages and the prophets of ancient India, the Middle East, everywhere in the world, in China. And with the voice of thunder, he told us that the wisdom of the ancients is true, is literally true. God does exist, spiritual life does exist. The goal of humanity, the goal of our lives is a spiritual goal. Enlightenment is a goal not just for the Buddha or just one or two spiritual outliers. It's for all of us. And until we find that, until we are on the path and we find that, we will not feel fulfilled. We will keep on seeking and we will keep on suffering. So he saw that, and what he set in motion at that time, both for the West and for India. In the West, he built a bridge from India to the West for the accumulated spiritual treasures of India to come to the West, which actually happened. When he came for the World Parliament of Religions in 1893, speaking for Hinduism and Vedanta. And one of his disciples, Sister Nivedita, who was this Irish lady, she became a nun later on. She writes that when this young monk, Indian monk, stood up to speak in Chicago in the World Parliament of Religions in 1893, before him was the dynamic modern West, with the science and technology. Edison was there, Tesla, the scientist, not the car, was there. So all of that. And behind him was 5,000 years of patient development in various forms of spirituality. So that became a meeting point of the East and the West. So he created this bridge. I mean, if you look at Vivekananda, after Vivekananda comes this entire range of teachers coming from the East, from India. Not just Vedanta, yoga, various forms of Buddhism, and so on. Many, many teachers for the last 100 years. So this is what he did for America.
Well, I want to underscore that he was the first to really bring.
He was the pioneer. There's no doubt about it.
So answer me this, because you were talking about this Irish lady, presumably, maybe not, raised Catholic, being a Christian.
Yes.
I'm going to presume also that many Americans, the vast majority, had never entertained the idea of non-duality before, as he taught it.
Yeah.
So how do you explain then that for most people with some form of connection to an organized religion, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, can look at Advaita Vedanta, which reflects on non-duality, and see it in any other terms except as blasphemy or heresy, because their traditions all refer to the God outside of self, and this is the opposite. How was he successful in pulling that off in the 1800s?
True. He said things which were very shocking to the Christian majority, church-going majority at that time. He said things like, "Sinners, it is a sin to call ye so. You're children of immortal bliss. You're one with God. It's a sin to call you sinners." You can imagine how shocking that was to the church-going audience. And Vivekananda had a little bit of a mischievous little boy in him. He would say with a half-suppressed smile that I have emptied entire halls in America. People would walk out in outrage over the supposedly non-Christian things he said. But a more Christian person did not live. He was deeply, deeply spiritual. And so people responded. I think America was ready. One reason, of course, was the American transcendentalists. Before Vivekananda, there was Emerson, who's been called the mind of America. There was, recently in Phil Goldberg in his book, American Veda, he says, if Emerson is called the mind of America, then Walt Whitman should be called the heart of America, and Thoreau should be called the soul of America. And all of them, they're deeply immersed in and well-versed in Vedantic thought. They all read the Gita, they all read the Upanishads. It's reflected in Emerson's writings and speeches, it's reflected in Whitman's poetry, it's reflected in the the reflections of in the contemplations of sorrow. So a part of America was at least prepared for this. It was not entirely new. Um, Along with the transcendentalists, Vivekananda's impact, the introduction of meditation, the growth of new thought. Of course, even then, non-duality was still very radical. That you and the infinite are one reality. You are Brahman. This is a stunning statement to make. But not just for Americans. You see, even in its land of birth, Advaita Vedanta, non-dual Vedanta, has been a comparatively smaller sect. It enjoyed enormous prestige, but most of the other sects of Hinduism were dualistic. There is God, you are an immortal being, and you have a relationship with God. God is the master, you are the servant, God is the ruler, or you the rule. Very Christian that way. I mean, the kind of dualistic relationship with God. Advaita Vedanta was like a bombshell among them, which says that you and the divine are one reality, actually.
It's impossible to understand from a Western perspective, and you're not from that perspective, how much of a bombshell it was. It was 1989. I'll never forget it. All of a sudden, the study group was and decided to take on A Course in Miracles, which is all about also reintroducing non-duality to Americans to the West. I was outraged. I mean, I wasn't the world's best young Catholic man back in 1989, but I was certainly strong in my beliefs that I held since childhood, to a certain degree anyway. And I remember tossing the book across the room. I'll never get around the fact that what I've been taught over the years, this goes back to the 50s when the knuckles would be rapped by the nuns if they heard you disbelieving that the Catholic faith was the one true faith in all the world. Things have changed a lot since then. But it was really difficult to put your arms around it. And it was a slow, for me, transformation. 15 years with the Course in Miracles, 25 years with Sai Baba's teachings, Ramana Maharshi's teachings. Finally, it blossoms to the extent I never really anticipated. And I don't know if it's just because I'm super slow or if others have the same problem digesting what your message is.
Yes, it can be difficult if we are brought up thinking that you and God are different, and in that case, you need to establish a relationship with God, and it would be blasphemous to think that I and the divine are one reality. And that's shocking for a lot of people. But let's remember one thing which helped was Vedanta is very inclusive. So it does not set off dualism against non-dualism. By the way, it would be good to define dualism and non-dualism before we go off
Yes.
walk down. Because I remember when I came here, monks told me that, remember, you're going to the West. When you talk about dualism and non-dualism, it means very different things in the West than it does in India. In India, dualism, in the US, in the West, dualism means the dualism of good and evil, for example, right and wrong.
Yeah.
In India, it's a more metaphysical thing. God, the individual being, and the world, they are different entities in relationship with each other. That's dualistic. There's more than one reality. Non-dualistic would be it's all one reality appearing as many. So it's a metaphysical understanding, a metaphysical concept, non-duality. Now, Vedanta is inclusive. So it does not play off dualism against non-dualism. It does not say, oh, my poor man, you were worshipping God till now. What superstition, what silliness. Now you see that you are the divine. That's the truth. No, what Vedanta says is, what you realize to be your own reality, and I'm quoting Vivekananda. If you see this Atman, your real divine self, if you see it, he says, seen from the outside, it is the God of religion. Seen from the outside means, if I don't want to do this Vedantic investigation, the self-inquiry, and if I just say there is an ultimate spiritual reality, so my own self now becomes the God of religion for me. However, what non-dual Vedanta says that it just need not be a question of belief. You can actually come to see it through this process of Vedantic self-inquiry. Another thing, it's not entirely alien to the Abrahamic religions. So, for example, there have been Christian, especially Catholic non-dualists. Meister Eckhart comes to mind, 13th, 14th century German Catholic monk, who is so non-dualistic in his writings that an Indian non-dualist will immediately resonate with it. I mean, I do at least. Look at this statement. The ground of God and the ground of my soul are one and the same. This is literally the essential teaching of Advaita Vedanta, that thou art. So what happened in India was these teachings entered into a hot, contested debate with other schools, the dualistic schools. What happened in Europe and the Middle East was the same insights were there, but they were persecuted. They were marginalized, wiped out, or persecuted. Uh, these insights are bound to be there. Wherever there is a serious spiritual inquiry in the history of human civilization, they will come, at least some will come to this realization that the one which we intuit as the God of the universe is not different from me. Is somehow we are deeply, deeply connected. Connected, at least identical, according to Advaita Vedanta.
A follow-up question on this, I had planned to ask it later on, but it fits in here too. So the God of the universe, and I am that I am Brahman,
Yes.
which precludes anything else. There's not only not two me's, there's not even a me, there's the I am.
Yes.
And to relate to it as I've learned to through this practice. What about the world? I hear still conflicting descriptions by people who take one side or the other, that the world is real, or it's as unreal as vanilla ice cream, because there is only the I am. Where do you come down on that?
So the world, what would be the status of the world? The Advaita Vedanta answer is straightforward. It's unreal. Brahman alone, the spiritual reality alone is real. What you experience as the world is an appearance of that. Before enlightenment, what we are experiencing is this world, and we think this is a real thing. And that's the ultimate reality. We are wrong there. Advaita Vedanta says we are wrong. Once we are enlightened, when we look back upon this world, we see it as nothing but an appearance of God or of that divine reality, Brahman. Now, it's the same thing when whether you say the snake is false and the rope is real. So you can say that the snake is real in the sense that it's a rope.
Yeah.
Or it's false in the sense that it's a snake. In the sense of a physical world out there and that being the ultimate reality, no, that's wrong. There is a deeper reality here, and the deeper reality is not a material reality. It's a spiritual reality. So that's Advaita Vedanta position. But there's, as I said, there's a whole spectrum of positions. So there are dualistic devotional schools which go with the common sense view. You think the world is real? Yes, the world is real. You think you are an individual being separate from everybody else? Yes, that's obviously true. All that we are teaching, the dualistic schools will say, all that we are teaching is into this experience of your world as a physical world out there, as living beings, human beings, we are introducing God, Brahman. So you worship God. Now notice one thing. When in Vedanta, when we say something is real or unreal, you have to be careful how we use the words real and unreal. So from a Vedantic perspective, the world, it can be experienced. It can be the object of language. That means language operates here. We can use words to designate things. I can say this is a computer. I can say this is a table, and words will work. They will designate actual objects in the world, and you can experience those objects, by which I mean you can see the world, you can hear, smell, taste, touch the world, you can think about the world, you can remember things and people in the world. So these three things work in the world. You can experience the world, you can use language about it, and you can transact with the world. In Sanskrit, nama rupa vyavahara. Rupa means form. It includes form, sight, smell, taste, touch. Nama means concepts, language, operation of language. And vyavahara means transaction. You can go to a job, you can earn money. All of that will work. Before non-dual realization and after non-dual realization, all of that will work. Then in what sense is the world unreal? It's unreal in the sense that this world is not what it seems to be. So just like a movie, in the movie, there may be cops and robbers, there may be King Kong, and there may be, space battles. And when you realize it's a movie, it's not real. Still, you can still see the space battles and King Kong and talk about it and write reviews about it and say it's a good movie or a bad movie. All of that will still work, even when you know it's a movie. So Vedanta Vedanta does not say that when you become enlightened, suddenly the world will disappear in a puff of smoke and something will be replaced by some other thing. No, you will continue to see the same thing, hear the same thing. You will continue to, language will work, all your faculties will work. You still have a body, still have a mind, you still have the people around you. In Vedanta, we say, knowledge doesn't destroy anything. Knowledge just reveals reality.
I saw that revealed in the face of one of your brother monks in San Diego once. I don't think you were there. Perhaps you were. Quite elderly, silver hair, beatific smile. He talked, but he didn't need to talk. You could read everything by his expression, by the essence of his presence. And I suspect, fully realized, though I'm sure he was, or at least I'm going to guess he was just there for the joy of it all at this point in his life, for other people's joy.
Right. Once you realize a movie is a movie, you don't ask, oh, why is the hero doing these things if it's just a movie? Why would you do anything else differently? So this life will continue. The body will continue as it is. But internally, there's a world of difference. Internally, you're finally at peace. Finally, you know what it all really is. Finally, most importantly, you know what you really are. And that you are this limitless existence, consciousness, bliss. So the difference is this. You know you cannot die. Like Vivekananda said, I know I cannot die, so I'm not in a hurry. The body will die, but I'm quite clear I'm not the body. So let's put it this way. You asked another question about, suppose there's a person who's not enlightened, and would that person still be seriously convinced that this world of experience is an appearance? This professor of philosophy, Buddhist philosophy, Professor J. Garfield, he gave a classical Indian example of the mirage, but he added a little twist to it himself, a modern twist to it. It's used in Buddhism too. So this idea of a mirage. A mirage is, it looks like water, but it isn't water. So it just looks like that. When Vivekananda himself gives the example of the mirage to describe what it is like to be enlightened. So he says when he was walking in the deserts of Rajputana, that's a big desert in India, in the western side of India, he was thirsty and he saw water in the distance. He walked eagerly towards it. And when he reached it, he saw it's a mirage. There's no water there. Then he started walking again. And when he looked back, he saw water again. But now he knows it's a mirage. So exactly like that, the enlightened person knows this world to be an appearance, the mirage that it is. However, the person also knows the reality, that he is Brahman. Now, this professor, this example will relate to your question. This professor said, notice that these three levels of understanding. One is the person who doesn't know what a mirage is. And he's talking about his experience of driving in Arizona, in the flat desert land. So you're driving along and you see shimmering water in the distance, where you know there can't be any water in the high desert. And yet there's water. So this is a person who doesn't understand what a mirage is and sees the water and says, that's water. That's one example. There's the example of the ordinary person, as long as we do not have spiritual insight. The second example is of the person who knows what a mirage is and who drives along and sees that water and says, oh, it looks like water, but it must be the mirage I've read about. This is the second person. Who is this person? This is the spiritual seeker, the one who's studying philosophy and Vedanta and trying to understand things sort of in between like us. And then the next is the person who's enlightened. That person sees the mirage and says, that's the mirage. Is absolutely not even fooled for a moment that, oh, it's water, but it could be a mirage, what I read about. That's the problem of the in-between person. And the person who doesn't know anything about this will just say it's water. So these three stages. And then he added a little modern twist to it. He said there's something called polarized glasses. If you wear those glasses while you're driving, it seems you will not even see the mirage. I mean, that illusion will not be there.
Right.
So the person who is in a samadhi, in a deep spiritual meditative absorption, will not actually experience the world also. So that's another possibility. There are various states of spiritual absorption called samadhi, where only the divine essence is intuited. I'm using the words very carefully. the divine essence, Brahman, is intuited, and the world is nowhere on the scene at all. Neither the world outside, nor the body, nor the individuality.
Let's
What can
take
you
it
do?
one step further then, if we can. And I'm thinking of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, after whom your organization was named. He was enlightened at the
Yes.
time of his death. He was aware of Maya, of the mirage of water, but he also suffered pain. I heard you say that he actually suffered pain. I think it was 1866. He had throat cancer, which is a very difficult.
1886, yes.
Yeah. And at that time, when he died, you also said, well, if he suffered pain and he felt pain, he had the gift of enlightenment that enabled him to see through the pain to the serenity of eternity that must have mitigated the pain or reduced to some extent. Is that reserved only for people who are enlightened at the time of their suffering? Or is that a possibility for anyone?
It's possible for everybody, not only possible, it's something that we must realize and make a reality in our lives. That's the saving power of spirituality. That's transcending pain. Transcending pain is not a painkiller. A painkiller will suppress the pain so that you don't feel it, at least for a time being. Above it, it's there, but you are fine.
Mhm.
So the example, well-known story goes, he was suffering and dying from throat cancer. He did pass away in 1886. Few months before he died, he was very sick. And one of his disciples, young man who later became a monk, came and said, "Sir, how are you today?" And Sri Ramakrishna said weakly, it hurts. He pointed to the tumor in his throat. "It hurts, and I cannot eat." And this young man, for whatever reason, he suddenly burst out and he said, "But sir, I see that you are in great bliss." Now, that would be a crazy thing to say to a dying, a person with terminal cancer who's dying of cancer. But Sri Ramakrishna burst out into a brilliant smile and he said, "Oh, the rascal has found me out. He has seen through me." So now what does that mean? Does that mean he was play acting? Did it not hurt? Was he unable to eat, not unable to eat? No, it was all true. It did hurt. It hurt as much as it would hurt any cancer patient. He was
So
suffering, like any other patient. And yet, here's the difference. Then what does enlightenment do? What does spirituality do for you in that case, practically? It gives you access to that dimension of your being where you realize from which perspective you can clearly see you are fine in spite of the body and its suffering. You're absolutely fine. And so you are in great place. From that perspective, it's fine. Another great master of our tradition, Swami Shivananda, who was a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, in his old age, he used to suffer from severe asthmatic bouts, sometimes passing nights without sleep. So after one such episode, next morning, the younger monks came and bowed down to him and said, "So, Swami," which means a monk, "Swami, how are you?" He said, "Oh, I'm fine, I'm fine." So they were a little taken aback and they said, "But we heard you couldn't sleep all night. You suffered a lot." And Swami Shivananda, as if realizing falling from a great height, he just said, "Oh, you mean the body? Not good, not good at all." So one can actually be centered in such a high spiritual state, which can become natural, effortless for you, that the body becomes a thing. Thing which is damaged and dying, maybe in pain and getting old and diseased, and you're fine.
We heard you talk about that very thing just the other night. My wife Jody and I listened to YouTube videos at 5 o'clock during our meditation time, and we heard you talk in San Diego. You would come down from Hollywood and Los Angeles, drive down to San Diego, our beautiful Vedanta center there, much smaller, I'm sure, and give these crisp, clear talks. At one time, you talked about the very subject you mentioned right now. A man in the hospital dying of some disease also was blind. And I think you were there, you were visiting him, and he radiated bliss, yet he was still suffering.
Yes.
Similar explanation, I would imagine.
Similar. And I've seen many such examples. And it's not limited to Vedanta alone. Anybody who's practiced a deep kind of spirituality, it doesn't have to be non-dual. It can be a deeply devout Catholic, a deeply devout, devotee of Krishna. Sri Ramakrishna was a deeply devout devotee of the Divine Mother Kali. So God in any form, a deep, genuine spirituality, which is a living reality for you, will help you. Will
What if
help you.
it's not just physical pain, but emotional pain? A parent finds their child is seriously ill in a
It,
hospital.
it could be. Emotional pain is even worse, especially if it's somebody beloved to you who is suffering. M, his name was Mahendranath Gupta. He's the biographer of Sri Ramakrishna, but not biographer, sorry, sort of diary keeper. He would write down the conversations that Sri Ramakrishna had, and later on he published this book, um, which has become a sort of standard reference work in our tradition. In English, it's been translated as the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. So it's just dialogues, conversations. So M, he was a very saintly man. In later life, after Sri Ramakrishna passed, in later life, very saintly man, he was teaching the Bhagavatam, which is a spiritual, very important spiritual text in the Hindu tradition. And monks and other devotees, also lay devotees, would attend his classes. One day, he's going to the class to teach this gentleman, M, many years after Sri Ramakrishna has passed. And a monk runs up to him and gives him a telegram. In those days, long before email and stuff, a telegram. And M looks at it, reads it, puts it into his pocket, and goes to class and teaches. And while the class is going on, this monk whispered to another monk, what was on that telegram which he read and put in his pocket and came to class? The telegram came from Calcutta. This was in Benares. So it came from Calcutta, and it said his daughter died. His daughter died. He saw that, and I'm sure he was devastated. And yet he has something which he's centered in, beyond the storms of life. That doesn't make it, it's not escapist. That doesn't make it one bit less painful. He's not in a high spiritual mood where he can't even see the world. He can see the world. He knows that his daughter is dead. But at the same time, he has found the reality of this universe, the reality of his daughter, himself, and everybody else. And that's the most valuable thing and the most important thing, to keep your eyes on the ball. So in the Gita, it is said, what is being enlightened? What good does it do you? It says, finding which you do not think there is anything higher to find in life anymore. You have found the greatest thing in life. Being centered in which even the greatest of sorrows cannot shake you. Even the greatest of sorrows cannot shake you. So emotional pain, there can be emotional pain, but at a deeper level, it's still all right. He is all right. His daughter is also all right in that sense.
It's sort of like living at a level of equanimity, as I hear people talk about from time to time, although not that often. I want to switch gears, go into something in a different direction. We'll come back to a couple of questions in our remaining time. I promised my wife, Jody, that I would ask something that we both share an interest in. I've heard you talk about it before, so I'll keep this brief, and feel free to keep it brief yourself. That is to say, spend a couple of minutes talking about your upbringing. I can't help but imagine that you must have been a very normal little boy.
Very normal and very average, very average little kid. And I think I still am. I'm still that little kid. It's not that the person is extraordinary. None of us, the monks who have made this a specialization in our lives, a spiritual pursuit, we don't think we're extraordinary. The only reason, what is extraordinary about us is the teaching, is the spiritual life. That's what is extraordinary. We got hold of something powerful and extraordinary, and that's it. So if I grew up on the eastern part of India, on one of the coastal state of India called Odisha, there is a city called Bhubaneswar, which is the capital of that state, and it's a very ancient city. It's called the city of temples. And I grew up very close to the ashram. My parents were devotees. So we grew up with all these books in the house about Vivekananda and all. And what was crucial was I read these books saying that, enlightenment is real, God realization is real, the spiritual life is real. And not only real, that is the purpose of life. And I took that seriously. Now I blessed that normal average kid who sat and read those, pored over this book seriously. I blessed that kid because that kid was wiser than anybody else in the world. Somehow, by some, I believe, some special grace of God, maybe we believe as Hindus, the karma of past lives, that kid had the wisdom to recognize truth. Maybe he didn't understand subtle philosophy and metaphysics, but he recognized truth very saw it. And
Wow.
I was inspired to follow it.
That's a great revelation about being a child. Were you also as funny then as you are now? Were you also as loving then as you are now in many ways?
Again, I think I was and I am still pretty average. I mean, people have different personalities. I have seen monks who are not at all funny, who are not at all sweet and kind, who might be quite strict and harsh, but they're kind within. There's not a monk. I have not seen a single monk who is not your well-wisher. That's a beautiful thing about being a monk, is that one of the vows we take, central vows, is none need be afraid of us. We are on your side, whoever you are, whoever you are. So we are well-wishers. A monk is a well-wisher for everybody, well-wisher in the highest sense, in the sense of taking you towards the goal of your life, your spiritual realization, of your enlightenment, your Buddhahood, whatever you call it. So some monks might be strict. They might want you to make progress in the right direction. They will not, what's the word, mollycoddle you. Some monks might be more motherly and sweet and affectionate and encourage you that way. That's the only difference.
When did you realize you had such a gift for clarity of expression of very challenging thoughts, spiritually speaking?
And it should not be confused with spirituality. Many people think, oh, you must be really enlightened and very spiritual. No, I just have the capacity and the sort of feel for teaching subtle and complicated things. And I love this subject. I mean, I love Vedanta, I love spirituality. So when did I discover? Maybe the first time I discovered this was when I first became a monk, and I was asked to teach school kids. This was 30 years ago. And I became a very popular teacher, and I was really good at telling stories. And many of the things which you see now in the talks, the elements were there. And those kids whom I taught, they're all grown up, they have kids of their own, but they still say that those classes were amazing when we were children. I was teaching history, I mean, I was teaching economics, but they loved those classes. One thing I learned was, if you are enthusiastic about your subject, if you're excited about your subject, that excitement and enthusiasm communicates itself to the audience. If it's, maybe it could be a bunch of school kids, it could be a group of meditators or philosophy students or whatever.
I can only imagine your mother and your father must be exceedingly proud of the son they raised and who you became as a man.
Funny story, all monks have these funny stories to share about their parents, who would to begin with would be horrified that this kid is throwing away a career and a job and a family and running off to be on some spiritual adventure. I remember my mom she thought that, look, in India, it's Bollywood is like Hollywood. So he said, some kids run away to Bollywood to be actors, and they have these silly dreams. And this boy is also like that. He just thinks he's going to go off and sit under a tree and be enlightened or some such thing. He'll be back. But over the time, I think they reconcile themselves to that. And I see this in the lives of all the monks. Their parents, in general, over the years, they become, they understand. They understand and they begin to appreciate it. And they feel fulfilled that at least this child took a difficult but very noble, very ideal, had a very high ideal in life, and gave it a good go. So my mom is very happy. My father passed long ago.
You're a model to many people, not just within your family, but outside of your family, on what the potential is of the human condition. I can't find it here in my many, many pages of notes, but there's an author from Quora, an online spiritual magazine. He refers to you actually as knowing that you are self-enlightened. And he says, but of course, you would never acknowledge that. My point is, why would they keep that under a bushel basket without ego as much as humanly possible.
Generally, in the Indian tradition, and not just Indian tradition, you will find it in the among the Christian mystics also. They hesitate to speak about their private experiences, spiritual experiences. First of all, because they are very precious, they're the deepest at the core of their being. Second, from a non-dual perspective, from an Advaitic perspective, claiming that I am enlightened or I know the ultimate reality is technically wrong. And there are a number of texts in the Upanishads and later texts also, which say that those who claim that they know not. And those who say they do know not, they know. So it's not that I know Brahman, that would be enlightenment. Rather, I am Brahman. Now, it's not that all of them keep quiet about their spiritual reality, about their realization. There are some who do talk about it. Sri Ramakrishna talked about it to some extent, at least. Vivekananda and some of the other disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. We believe those who are specially commissioned by God, they alone can be the teachers of humanity. If you take the label of a teacher upon yourself, it doesn't do much good. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, one man may speak fine words and people will clap and appreciate what he said, but that has no effect on their lives. Another man may come and speak a few simple words, but it may transform the lives of people. So it is character which speaks rather than ideas or oratory or all of that. So genuinely enlightened people, genuinely spiritual masters, would often keep their own experiences private, sometimes talk about them. And they are also I believe, under divine inspiration, only when it helps humanity. For the rest of us, even if we are far along in our spiritual path, we see that it's not enough to know something or to get clarity about something, but it also must be expressed in life, in thought, word, and deed. You must live and see that the realization and the life are one. And that is a long effort. To come to the point of enlightenment takes a long time of spiritual practice and effort. The moment of enlightenment itself can be a flash, a sudden revelation. But afterwards also there's a long effort of manifesting that realization in life.
Quick question on that, quick follow-up. I've heard it said many times, not so much recently, there seems to be an uptick in universal interest in Vedanta Advaita, that nobody can will themselves to become enlightened, that your name's got a number on it and either your number comes up or it doesn't. Do you agree with that?
No, just the opposite. Ask and you shall find. Knock and it shall be opened. Absolutely. There is no doubt about it. We are enlightenment-seeking beings. We are spiritual beings, all of us. I love that saying. I've said it so many times, I don't know the source of that we think we are human beings in search of a spiritual experience. But the truth is that we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yes.
So who can stop? We're not enlightened. We are spiritual beings. And realizing that our spiritual nature is enlightenment, since you are already that, who can stop you? Who can stop you? It's not a question of your number coming up. It will come up. It's inevitable. It must. It's only when you are ready, when you want to ask for it, then it will happen. I don't know what if other things in the world, if you ask for it, will you get it or not? Vivekananda says, whatever you ask, you will get it. Therefore, don't ask. He says, do not have desires, because what you desire, you will get. After all, who can stop you? You are the one infinite reality of this universe. Everything you will get. So do not, and therefore do not ask for worldly things. You'll trap yourself more and more. But enlightenment, God realization, spiritual realization, whatever you call it, that is our birthright. We can ask for it, we must ask for it, and we will get it when we ask for it.
Very encouraging words for anybody who's listening right now. Swami, I attended a live Zoom conference with you that I looked forward to with great anticipation several months ago with Michael James, a friend of mine, a famous scholar in his own right of Ramana Maharshi, 20 years living in Tiruvannamalai, written and translated many books and scholarly papers. I thought of it as being a debate coming up between you, whom I was very familiar with, having met you in San Diego, and my new friend, Michael James, it wasn't a debate at all. I don't think he had any areas of disagreement with his view of Ramana's teachings versus Ramakrishna's teachings.
I think he spoke more about Ramakrishna than I did. I found him to be a very saintly man.
Yeah. So let's talk about Ramana Maharshi a little bit. Is it different? Are there differences, or are these just difference in name only? Or do you have individual areas that are unique to yourselves?
Yes and no. There obviously are differences, but what one must realize is, as Sri Ramakrishna said, God is the only guru. There is only one guru, which is Satchidananda. And he gave the example of a roof of a house in a heavy rainfall, like you see in Calcutta, and there are spouts. If you see the old colonial architecture, so there is like the head of a lion, the head of a gargoyle, head of a tiger, and through the mouth of those the water from the roof pours out. But the water is all coming from the same source, the roof from where the rainwater is pouring down. So the teachings may seem to come from different masters, but let us remember, genuine spiritual teachings come only from one source, from divinity, from that spiritual reality which we call God or Brahman. So in that sense, it's one source. But when it comes through different channels, there are uniquenesses. Some master may stress devotion. Ramana Maharshi was very unique in powerfully stating the case for non-dual realization, that bringing our attention back again and again to the one which we are, the who am I inquiry. Sri Ramakrishna, for example, was very inclusive. He said, as many faiths, so many paths. These are all different paths to realization, and he did practice a number of these paths. The philosophical path of knowledge, the path of meditation, the path of the tantras, the path of devotion, Christianity, Islam, some mysticism in Christianity and Islam. And he realized all of them lead to the same reality. So are there differences? There are, and it's good that there are. In the economy of God, you'll have tremendous variety. In the garden of God, you have this variety of spiritual paths and teachings, and it's all good. It's not that one is true and the other one is false. They all work. They all work, and they will take you to the goal.
In one of the talks, you talked about the difference between Christianity and Advaita Vedanta. Christians believe that their heavenly reward comes after the body goes away. And in awakening, Vedanta, Advaita, it happens now with an experience of who you are. They can be small, but they're nonetheless recognizable. It happens from time to time that people come to me and they'll say, or even in a group setting, I've followed everything he's taught me to do. I've looked at Advaita Vedanta as if I was born with it, and I have that much of a great interest in it. But experiences, they're skipping me somehow. Why is that? Can you address that?
Yeah. I'll give first the important answer, the practical answer. And this question keeps coming up, and I'll tell you why it comes up and what would the actual answer from classical Advaita Vedanta be. I can also tell you what the answer from Ramana Maharshi also would be. But before that, let me give you the practical answer which will satisfy people, which will give people something to hold on to. What do you do in Advaita Vedanta? Once you claim you have got clarity, in that case, if you still feel you have something to do and something to get, in that case, keep doing selfless action, karma yoga, focus on a devotional practice, bhakti, in whichever form appeals to you, and meditation, morning and evening, prolonged periods of quietening and stilling the mind. This is where you need to concentrate, not on the Advaita anymore, if you feel you have got clarity there. So this is the practical advice to people who want something to do. But let me just say, if you took this question to a classical Advaita Pandit, and if you took the question to Ramana Maharshi, their answer would be quite different. Why are experiences skipping me? I've got clarity about it. I know what you're talking about, but I'm missing the experience itself. My life has not been transformed. I don't have that spiritual transformation. Advaita Vedanta would say, classical Advaita Vedanta would say, you think you've got it, you haven't. If you had truly listened, if you had got a clarity and grasp of Advaita Vedanta, you wouldn't be asking this question. So what do? Go back to the teachings once again. Repeat. Well, I've repeated for years. Doesn't matter. Repeat again. Keep listening. You're not getting it.
Yeah.
That's the classical Advaita Vedanta. A variation of this, I'm sure Ramana Maharshi would have said. If Ramana Maharshi, if you go to Ramana Maharshi, you know what he would say. He would say that the experiences are escaping me. He would immediately say, who is the one? Who is that one who feels experiences are being that are escaping him? Look inside. Who is the one who is complaining? Who is saying that I understand I am Atman Brahman somehow, but I still feel incomplete. I still feel I am not enlightened. Who is that one? And so he would direct you back to self-inquiry again.
Interesting. And I think that's something, and it also has to do with persistence. I mean, I've heard Michael share that thought from time to time through Ramana's teachings. Just show up. Just show up your daily meditation.
Stay with it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Stay with it. Stay with it.
I'm down to my last question or two, and I'll get to these so we can wrap it up and stay within an hour as much as we can. In June of 2016, Jody and I attended another one of your talks at the Vedanta Center here in San Diego. It was a lecture on, and I copied it down to make sure I got it right, on God in every experience. It was a lecture on simply the divine in every experience. I'm sending it out to friends who are voicing an interest coming from their traditions of Christianity. They hear me talk about it a lot, I'm sure way too much, that some of them become interested and want to know more about it. So my question to you is, have you ever seriously considered, and forgive me if this is already something you're practicing, have you ever seriously considered making one whole talk just for newcomers?
There was a senior Swami in our order who gave some advice for youngsters who gave talks and teachings. He said, in your talk, make sure there's always something for the newcomer, and there's something for long-time students of Vedanta. Something for everybody and everything for somebody. So that's a hard, it's a good rule, but a difficult rule to uphold. No, my approach is a little different. What I do is, I try to create excitement and enthusiasm about it, and then let people explore. So, for example, the Upanishads, it is customary to start with an easier one, like the Katha Upanishad. That was Vivekananda's favorite too. Whereas I started with the most difficult one, Mandukya Upanishad, the Mandukya Karika. And my thinking was, the logic was to go up to the peak of Mount Everest, see the highest view, and then we can take the scenic route, admire the valleys and the flowers and everything. The highest view may not be very easily comprehensible, may be very inhospitable and a cold and difficult place, but take a look there. And so the excitement it generates, that propels you to explore for yourself. That may not be very systematic, but I think that's one way of doing it.
That's very good. Thank you. I'm glad I asked the question because it has been something I've been interested in. The last question. I started doing these Sojourns interviews, which was an idea from my wife to me to do it. I mean, I was a reporter for 44 years, so I've done thousands of interviews. Why not do interviews with people on a spiritual path was the question. Very first person I chose was Dr. Houston Smith, the eminent professor from Berkeley, who wrote years ago, decades ago, one of the most popular books in English in the world, Religions of Man. They changed it to Religions of Humankind, where he actually lived the religions. And I was so proud and so privileged I felt to be able to be in his presence with a camera. And I asked him this in his bedroom. It was the only room that was quiet in his house in Berkeley. Could you share with us where you are at the cutting edge, at your advanced age, and after years of spiritual pursuit, where you are at your cutting edge of your spiritual outlook? And he talked for a long time on that. In the last minute here, could I ask you about where you are on the cutting edge of your spiritual evolution?
There are many sides to this. One is that the absolute accessibility of the divine. There is one limitless radiance in which we are immersed all the time, and it is staring at us all the time. It is a solution, a deep solution, not a surface solution to all our demands, our hungers, our thirsts, our problems, our cries, our sorrows at the deepest possible level. It won't make a poor man rich. It won't make a sick man healthy. But for that you need to go to a doctor or to go to a job or something. But at the deepest level, it will make you whole. It is what Christians call true healing. At the deepest level, it makes you whole. It's continuously available to us. That's what it seems like to me all the time. And I think more and more it's important to let people see that and share it, and then let them go on from there and develop in their own way. That's what feels like an urgent spiritual task right now.
Perfect. Just wonderful. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I hope I haven't taken too much of your time.
No, thank you. It was a pleasure. And now I realize why you're such a good interviewer. You've been doing this all your life. You're good at it.
Yeah, but they're usually about crimes down at City Hall and politics. They're not about spirituality. This is what I think I was born to do, just ask questions about the spiritual path. Swami Sarvapriyananda, we love you, we thank you, and we hope to see you again one day.
Certainly. Thank you so much. Please take care. Take care.
Bye-bye. See you. Well.